Good evening. We begin tonight with a new report about the Department of Justice and new information about its investigation into the fake electors plot, part of what the January 6th committee has called a multi-pronged effort by the former president and his allies to illegally overturn the results of the 2020 election. Specifically, subpoenas issued to people in multiple states who appear to have been involved in the plot. That includes the Georgia Republican Party chairman, who is said to have played a central role in organizing the slate of fake electors from his state and coordinated the effort with the former president's campaign. We'll have more on that in just a moment. The revelation comes the same day that the January 6th committee said it may delay further hearings after the one scheduled tomorrow. The reason, according to one of its members, Congressman Jamie Raskin, a deluge of new evidence, in his words. Now, he didn't elaborate, saying only that the new information goes beyond what we learned about yesterday, the existence of a documentary crew's interviews with the former president and his family recorded before and after January 6th. Those recordings have now been turned over to the committee. The report of federal subpoenas also comes a day after we learned two vital pieces of information. The first was testimony by the head of the Republican Party, Ronna McDaniel, that directly linked the former president to the plot.
What did the president say when he called you?
Essentially, he turned the call over to Mr. Eastman, who then proceeded to talk about the importance of the RNC helping the campaign gather these contingent electors in case any of the legal challenges that were ongoing changed the result of any of the states. I think more just helping them reach out and assemble them. But my understanding is the campaign did take the lead, and we just were helping them in that role.
So that was one new revelation. We also learned about other lawmakers' involvement in the scheme. Now, one of those was Senator Ron Johnson. He spent another day today trying to explain away his role, telling CNN today that, quote, this is a complete non-story, and that, quote, guys, this happened so fast, it's hard. This is 18 months ago. This just happened. Let's just be clear, though, about what he says just happened. The committee on Tuesday presented a text exchange between top aides for Senator Johnson and former Vice President Pence. It occurred, this text exchange, on January 6th. The timestamp on the text says 12:37 p.m. That's less than 30 minutes before the first barriers on Capitol Hill were breached. Now, the exchange reads as follows. Johnson's chief of staff says, Johnson needs to hand something to the vice president. Please advise. Then the vice president's aide responds, what is it? Then Johnson's chief of staff says, alternate slates of electors for Michigan and Wisconsin because archivists didn't receive them. Then Pence's staffer says, do not give that to him. Now, those texts show Johnson's top aide, his chief of staff, trying to pass slates of phony electors to the vice president of the United States moments before, on the very day he was to do his constitutional duty, certify the real electors, which would indicate to any reasonable person that Senator Johnson and his top aide were aware of this phony elector plot and actively trying to subvert the completely valid results of the 2020 election. It's not like Senator Johnson's top aide would just randomly pick up an envelope sent to their office and without reading it, try to hand it over to the vice president of the United States at a pivotal moment in American history, right? I mean, no person would be so foolish as to suggest that. But let's play the tape of Senator Johnson's explanation yesterday to several reporters, including CNN's Manu Raju.
Why was he even asking for that?
Because somebody delivered this to our office and asked to deliver that to the vice president.
Did you support his efforts to try to get those slates to the vice president?
No, I had no knowledge of this.
Who's the person that delivered?
I had no involvement in an ultimate slate of electors. I had no idea this thing would be delivered to us. Got delivered staff to staff. My chief staff did the right thing, contacted the vice president's staff. They said didn't want it, so we didn't deliver it.
Who's the person?
Again, that's the end of the story.
Who's the person that delivered it to your office?
I have no idea.
Okay, that is so not the end of the story. I mean, to hear Senator Johnson tell it, somebody, and he says he doesn't know who, delivered this phony slate of electors to his office. And Senator Johnson, a key supporter of the president, claims he had no knowledge that this was going on. Then he's saying that some unknown staffer forwarded the phony elector slate to his office to pass the vice president, and his chief of staff decided, oh yeah, that's a great idea at this pivotal moment in history when the vice president was under tremendous pressure and there's a huge rally going on, stop the steal, so-called, outside, that this would be the time to contact the vice president and pass along this phony slate of electors, which Ron Johnson claims he never saw and knows nothing about. And not only did Johnson deny any knowledge of it, but he also says his chief of staff, quote, did the right thing. Now, by the way, just as an aside, if you don't know how Washington Senate offices work, you don't want to throw your chief of staff under the bus because they pretty much know where all the bodies are buried, you know, not literally speaking. So Johnson is praising his top staffer for allegedly attempting to pass along a slate of phony electors, sight unseen, to the vice president just before this important moment in history. And as you mull over how likely that is, take a look at the senator's exchange with a different reporter yesterday.
Senator Johnson, how much did you know about what your chief of staff was doing with the alternate slates of electors? No, you're not. I can see your phone. I can see your screen. Explain what your chief of staff was doing. Does your chief of staff still work for you, Senator?
Can you explain what happened there? Why was your chief of staff even offering this to the vice president?
As a complete non-story, we've issued a statement. And this is a non-story.
It's classic. I mean, really, yeah, I can't hear you. I'm a very important meeting. I'm on a very, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a picture of my son. Yeah. When he's caught, he just gives up. He does the fake, you know, let me put down that non-existent phone call. Now, federal authorities are widening their probe into the fake electors plot, and that is where we begin tonight. I'm joined now by our senior justice correspondent, Evan Perez. Evan, what can you tell us about these new subpoenas?
Well, Anderson, these new subpoenas represent a major escalation of what is clearly a very big part of this Justice Department investigation now. We now know that these fake electors in Georgia, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania have received subpoenas. And in Georgia in particular, David Schaefer, who's the chairman of the Republican Party there, who played a central role in trying to organize these electors in Georgia. Again, this is one of the states where the FBI and the Justice Department has taken keen interest. Of course, the local district attorney is also investigating it there. And one of the things that we from talking to people tonight, we learned that, you know, the investigators are asking for communications with key people in the Trump campaign, Trump lawyers, people who were helping to organize this effort. That includes Rudy Giuliani, people like John Eastman, who we've heard so much about in the last few days. According to some of the sources that we've talked to today, they've come back to at least some of these people who we've previously reported they had come to before, and they wanted access to some of the names on a Signal chat that was going on in the days leading up to January 6th. Again, a major escalation of this investigation that the Justice Department clearly is zeroing in on who was organizing this from the level of the people surrounding the former president to try to set up exactly what Ron Johnson was trying to accomplish on that day on January 6th.
So the phony electors are communicating via Signal, which for anybody who doesn't know is a highly secure encrypted app that anybody can use.
That's right. They were having encrypted communications. And look, we have encrypted communications doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. The FBI clearly wants access to the names of people who were on that group chat and wants to know more about it. They need to know what was being said on that, and obviously they've had great success in the other parts of the January 6th investigation, getting to some of those communications on Signal and in other encrypted communications.
What do they hope to learn from David Schaefer, the Georgia Republican Party chair? I mean, has he cooperated with any of the investigations into the false elector plot in the past?
Well, he's now basically a central player in 3 investigations. The investigation being done by the January 6th committee, the one being run by the district attorney in Georgia, and now the one being done by the FBI. And, you know, because he is the top guy in Georgia helping to coordinate all of this, he would know exactly who and who in the Trump campaign was helping to organize this. And again, he would be a key person to understand exactly how this was being organized. And remember, some of these people who initially said that they were willing to be part of this ended up dropping out because they were uncomfortable with what was being done.
Yeah, Evan Perez, appreciate it. Insight now from our senior political correspondent, Abby Phillip, and CNN legal analyst Norm Eisen, former counsel to the House Democrats during the former president's first impeachment. I want to get to Abby to these subpoenas in a moment, but first, Ron Johnson, the fact that Johnson was not too long ago the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee is really extraordinary to me. I mean, how one goes from that to, having your staffer try to pass this along to the vice president.
I think over the last few years, Ron Johnson has also been one of the biggest purveyors of misinformation and lies around the election, but around a lot of other things, including COVID-19. So this is part of a kind of overall, picture of someone who in the highest levels of government in the United States Senate is committed to things that are verifiably untrue.
Is this just to stay in power? I mean, is this where he's just taking cues from he thinks what his voters want to hear?
There are some questions about how much people believe this stuff, how much they're doing it for power, but he's up for re-election coming up and is actually going to face a real significant challenge. So there are some questions about whether his voters even want him to take some of these stances. But I do think that where he is right now at the center of this a question about what was his staffer doing trying to pass this off to Pence just, maybe minutes before Pence was supposed to do his constitutional duty. It takes it to another level. He goes from just spreading the lies to participating in it in a particular way, or his staffer does. And I think that that's just a different place for him to be. How actually involved was he in trying to get these fraudulent documents to the vice president at a critical moment? And does that level of involvement really cross the line, whether politically or legally? I think that's a really big question, especially for someone like Johnson, who is facing, I think there's going to be a huge amount of Democratic attention trying to get him out of office, and bringing this to voters and saying it's not just the lies, there were actions behind it too. I think it could pose a problem for him.
He should also know that there are privacy screens you can put on your phone, which actually make it difficult for reporters to see if you are.
That's a time-honored trick, but it's like when we can see.
I'm not saying I haven't done it in an airport every now and then, being like, oh, I'm sorry,
When we can see the phone, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. You need a privacy screen. Norm Eisen, could Senator Johnson face legal trouble here, or his chief of staff?
Anderson, it will depend on what more there is to the story. His assertion at another point, he said some staff intern passed this along. I've worked up there, including during the impeachment, and documents don't go directly from some unnamed staff intern to a United States senator to the hands of the vice president in one of the most consequential and contested moments in American politics. The story just doesn't make sense. You'd have to show a high degree of engagement, but others are in that kind of legal jeopardy. That includes the individuals who've received subpoenas. And Anderson, we heard that very powerful testimony, you played it, from Ronna Romney McDaniel, the head of the RNC, saying that Donald Trump himself was pushing these phony electoral slates. And others, Rusty Bowers also testified about Trump's involvement. So I think Donald Trump has got to be feeling a little bit uncomfortable as this evidence continues to come out.
And Norm, you heard the reporting about the Justice Department's investigation into fake electors. Why isn't the January 6th committee just sharing all their information now with the Department of Justice? I know Benny Thompson said the other day they aren't going to delay their work to explain things to the DOJ, but why would they have to delay their work? Can they just email over the transcripts, the witness testimony, or have someone in Ron Johnson's office bring it over?
Anderson, it's never easy. We call it the accommodation process. I was involved in these conversations between the branches, Congress and the executive branch, and there's always a back and forth. I think on the committee's part, their view is they're extremely busy in processing the evidence. and they want to share, but they want to do it on their own pace. There's probably a little bit of a feeling there. You know, the DOJ did not charge Mark Meadows despite the criminal referral. They did not charge Dan Scavino. And so there's that element that comes in. But I'm confident that they will work it out. One of the criminal trials was continued to allow that process to work out. And it always somehow works out, Anderson. The same thing will happen here.
All right. Abby, the committee said that they are delaying their next round of hearings. I mean, there's testimony tomorrow, and then they're delaying the next ones until July. They said there's this whole abundance of evidence to go through. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, this is a dynamic process. As these hearings have been going on, you have people who are participating and cooperating with the committee, and those who weren't, who are watching it, who are seeing the evidence unfold, who are perhaps thinking about their own, self-interest and wondering maybe how much do I have to contribute to stay out of any kind of legal jeopardy. And so I think it is a dynamic process, and they are genuinely getting more things in as this is going along and as the politics of it is playing out before all of our eyes.
Yeah. We have some breaking news tonight. Uvalde School District Police Chief Pedro Arredondo has been placed on leave after weeks of criticism over the shooting that took the lives of 19 children. 19 children were murdered, killed, and 2 teachers. The school district superintendent said he placed Arredondo on leave due to the lack of clarity that remains, including unknown details from the investigations. Now, this comes as House Republicans today formally requested GOP members to vote against the newly unveiled bipartisan gun safety bill. The deal includes $750 million to help states implement and run crisis intervention programs. It closes the so-called boyfriend loophole, requires more gun sellers to register as federally licensed firearm dealers. It encourages more thorough reviews of people ages 18 to 21 who want to buy guns, creates new federal statutes against gun trafficking and straw trafficking, and increases funding for mental health programs and school security. The Senate is on track to pass it this week. It's expected to pass in the House once it passes in the Senate. Joining me now is Democratic Senator from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar. Senator Klobuchar, I appreciate you joining us. Your colleague, Senator Murphy, says this bill is not window dressing. These are a quote from him. This bill is going to save lives. Do you agree with that assessment? And how much progress is this in your view?
Yes, I do. The first important point is that this bill is going to save thousands of lives. And this isn't everything that I would have wanted to do. I think Chris would say the same thing. But we had Republicans that were willing to come to the negotiating table. And while I would have banned assault weapons, at least to 18 and 21-year-olds, but what did they do? They actually did something that's going to save lives. Number one, you can now look at the records of these 18 to 21-year-olds and take the time to talk to police officers in the area to find out what's going on. That wasn't happening before. Number two, the boyfriend loophole. 600 women a year, Anderson, are gunned down in domestic violence cases. Half of them have dating relationships. They're not married to the person. That has been a loophole in our law, that they get convicted of domestic abuse and then they can go out and get a gun. That has changed. Straw purchases. So many criminals go out there and get guns on behalf of someone else that's banned from getting a gun. Red flag law funding, mental health funding, as you just pointed out. So I thank my colleagues. All of us worked on this together, but particularly Senator Murphy and Cornyn, Senator Tillis, Senator Sinema, and so many others. And we have strong support for this bill in the Senate. People are willing to stand up and say we're finally going to do something on gun safety, and it is a beginning. And I think it's sad that the House Republicans are going out against it. Hopefully they will pick up some votes, just as we have Republicans in the Senate.
Well, there's probably a lot of people who wanted this to, obviously, as you said, you wanted this to go farther in terms of gun safety or gun control. What do you say to those who say this doesn't go far enough and that this may make it harder to try to get further changes, in the future?
We have worked on this for decades, and after Parkland, I sat across from Donald Trump at the White House, along with a number of senators. He said he was going to do something about background check. I still have the piece of paper. 8 times, 9 times he said it with the hashtag marks that I made that day. Nothing happened. After Sandy Hook, nothing happened. And when you talk to the families who've been working on this for so long, They understand how difficult this has been, how disappointing this has been. So to start with something that's going to save lives, even if a particular provision wouldn't have saved their own babies' lives, that is an act of love and generosity of spirit that you hear from the families of those that have lost loved ones. That's why we're moving ahead. And I think it actually paves the way in the future to look at some of these other provisions. But if you do nothing and you just go home, then we've got nothing. And that's why it's so important to pass this bill on a bipartisan basis.
CNN is reporting tonight that the lead Republican negotiator, Senator John Cornyn of Texas, spoke at a GOP Senate lunch today, ticked through areas in which the NRA got what it wanted from this process. He noted the boyfriend loophole does not apply retroactively to past domestic abusers, only applies to recent relationships, that there's a 10-year so-called sunset provision to ensure all enhanced background checks on juvenile records will essentially be repealed in a decade. What do you say to that?
As someone that has tried to pass this bill for 10 years, I obviously would have looked back at all past convictions. But what does this bill do? Right now, only 19 states have fully closed the loophole. So after this bill passes, in those other states, if someone is convicted of domestic violence in any of these other states, it bans them from going out and getting a gun, even if it's a dating partner that has been involved in this. That is a big change. That's a game changer. When I just told you half the homicides actually related to domestic violence are boyfriends. The final thing, in the states that have closed the loophole, Anderson, 13% reduction in domestic homicides. Those are real numbers. And so to me, it's not everything that I wanted. And I worked really hard to make this as strong as possible. But to finally close this loophole that the NRA has opposed year after year after year, issuing statements, testifying against it, doing all kinds of things, we have finally gotten it done.
Senator Klobuchar, I appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks, Anderson.
Joining me now is Nicole Hockley. Her son Dylan was one of the 20 first graders killed in the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. She's now the CEO of the Sandy Hook Promise, a nonprofit with mission to stop school shootings. Thanks so much for being with us. You were involved in this. When you and I spoke first about this in the wake of the Uvalde killings, you were optimistic.
Yes.
What do you think about the end results?
I'm still very optimistic. I mean, we're going to a vote tomorrow, and I fully expect that this will pass. And I want to be so thankful to the senators that have led this, because this has not been an easy task for them. And I fully appreciate the conversations, the compromises, and the actions that they've had to take. And
compromises on both sides, Republicans and Democrats.
Sides. Absolutely. This has not been, no one is like winning here except for people, because it's a step forward that's going to save lives, as Senator Klobuchar said. It
was so interesting to see John Cornyn at that meeting in Texas of the Texas Republican Party getting booed throughout his speech. It's just a sign of there's extremes on both sides, and politicians have to listen to their constituents.
There's one that, yes, you have to listen to all the constituents, and that requires also listening to the noise from the extremes at both ends of this. But I think what Senator Cornyn has done, as others have done, is stand up for the rest of us that aren't in the extreme, that want to see something happen, that care about creating a safer future, that care about keeping our kids safe, and want to create something that helps deliver that change. And that's what he's doing.
What to you is the most important? I mean, maybe it's a stupid question to say what's the most important, because it's, I was talking to Senator Murphy about this, and he talked about the totality of all these is what's important.
Yeah, and I do think the fact that it's a multi-pronged package that has so many elements, so it's not just mental health, it's not just school safety, it's not just gun safety. The fact that they're saying this is a problem that comes from all of those areas, and there are solutions in all those areas. So to be bold enough to say we're going to create solutions in each of those, I think that's huge, really.
Is more possible? I mean, what?
More is always possible. This is a step forward, and I think it's going to be interesting for some politicians who have been afraid to touch this issue to realize that they can vote yes on this, do something right for their constituents, and still retain their political careers. I think that's going to send a positive message that then means we can look at other causes of gun violence and other areas that we still need to strengthen. These are not perfect solutions. There's steps forward. There's more steps to take. And there will always be that compromise element required.
Nicole Hockley, thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Hearings was Wandrea Shea Moss, who testified yesterday. Ms. Moss was an election worker in Fulton County, Georgia during the 2020 election. She became the center of conspiracy theories about the vote count, then the target of direct and racist attacks by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and then by people who believed him. Her testimony yesterday illustrated how anybody, just regular people doing their jobs, can become victims of election lies, and in this case did. More from Gary Tuckman.
This is Wandrea Shea Moss last month, receiving the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award.
Forgive me for a little case of the nerves. Unlike my fellow honorees, I'm not used to giving speeches. I'm not used to being in the spotlight either. Okay. What I'm used to is quietly doing my job.
And that's exactly why she was being honored, for quietly doing her job as an election worker in Fulton County, Georgia. She handled voter applications, absentee ballot requests, and helped process votes. It's a job she started in 2017 and held until just after the presidential election in 2020.
It all changed for me overnight. Ever since December 2020, my family has been under attack. Attacked because people have spread terrible lies. I'm sorry. Lies about me and my mother simply because we were doing our jobs.
In December 2020, the Trump campaign published a video and falsely claimed the edited clip shows Shea Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman, also an election worker, pulling fraudulent ballots from a suitcase in order to help Joe Biden win the state of Georgia. The claim was immediately debunked by election officials in Georgia, but the damage was done.
Ruby Freeman and Shea Freeman Moss.
Trump associates like Rudy Giuliani and right-wing media outlets jumped on the story, and Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman's lives were upended.
So help you God.
That's how Shea Moss found herself testifying in front of the House Select Committee yesterday.
Now, people are lying and spreading rumors and lies and attacking my mom. I'm her only child. Going to my grandmother's house. I'm her only grandchild. And my kid. It's just, I felt so bad.
With her mother sitting behind her, Shea Moss told the committee about the harassment they faced after the release of the video.
A lot of threats, wishing death upon me, telling me that, I'll be in jail with my mother, and saying things like, be glad it's 2020 and not 1920.